Hi guys, my name is Valentine. I'm 23 years old and I produce and DJ under the name Millean. Today I got a track for you, full. I did that together with Mr Belt Wezol. We're going to do a masterclass later today. And just out of curiosity, who of you guys actually heard the track? Okay, good. So it's not like I'm explaining some random piece of music here. That's good. We only have half an hour, so I'm going to try to show you as much as possible. There are like 3 main things I want to go through. Is the screen all right? Yeah, you can see that, right? All right. Which is, I'll try to not go in too technical, because I think the more important part about this record is like the creation of this, how it came together. Before we start though, are there any questions already? Like something you'd want to see right now? Otherwise I'm just going to dive in, but. We all good? Perfect. All right, so I'll play a little bit of the track, but what you're going to hear now is not actually the final product. I've opened up the very first project, actually, that I started working on before I sent it to Sam from Mr Belt Wezol. And what you'll hear is that it's very different in production, but the idea is, it kind of stayed the same throughout. And that's an important thing. You can be like the best technical producer there is, but if your idea sucks, it's still going to be a bad song, right? I feel like it's way more important to have a good idea and maybe not the best production that's out there. Because if necessary, you could also still, you could let someone else do your production. If you suck at production, but your ideas are amazing, you could get somebody else to do like the technical stuff. Just a thought, because I feel like more and more people, I teach at a production school in Utrecht, and I see more and more people who are focused on getting to know how a compressor works and how EQ works and how to get the best kick, whatever. And it's important, sure, but even more important is to just have a really good idea and a song that works, even with not the best sounds. So the version that I wrote right here, let's just kind of play the drop. As you see, some very important parts missing there if you heard the track before. But this is how it started, and then it kind of went to the breakdown. With a little synth, and that all was kind of there. So basically, we made it a lot fleshier in the end. I'm going to switch to another project later on, you'll kind of see that. But for now, the idea is there, and how this track was written from nothing, I'll show you my process. Because if you see the arrangement here, I have like the intro and then the drop and break, whatever. But on the left, you kind of see this little loop, basically, with all the elements. And I'll kind of explain how I do that. But this track started with the vocal. I was during COVID in an online session with a singer called Emily, and she sings under the name Illy and Betty Bloom. And we're in a session, and we were trying some stuff. I was making some beats, she was singing some lines, and it wasn't really working. Now, when you're in a session, I don't know if you guys work with singers or not, or maybe with just your friends. I made tons of records with just my friends, but when you're in a session, always try to sit it out. Always try to come up with new stuff. And don't be afraid to be like, hey, what we're doing right now is not working. Because that's at one point what happened. What we were doing wasn't kind of working. We both weren't really feeling it. And we're just like, okay, let's just try something completely different. We've been at this. We have like, I don't know, half an hour left before we have to do something else. Let's just try something from scratch. And I saw a guitar behind her. So I was like, I see you play the guitar. Can't you do something with the guitar? She was like, yeah, of course I can do something with the guitar. Cool. So she started playing guitar. I kind of showed her some examples, like I used to play guitar too, so I can still play a little bit. I showed her some chords. She started playing, and she was like, oh, this might be cool. And she put herself on mute, and she started singing. And I was like, okay, I can't hear it. Then she unmuted herself. She was like, how's this? And I was like, this is amazing. So sometimes think outside of the box. If somebody plays an instrument, a guitar or whatever, let them play it, because you'll get like a different angle than just, oh, here's a house beat. Try to make a house subline for it. So it didn't start as a house track. I'm not sure if I think I have the guitar as well, but the main vocal was this, yeah, this here. And we sped it up a lot. So I think originally we recorded it at 115 and, well, pitch down. So this was like the original thing. I'm a fool for you, so baby, if you And I'm kind of looking for the guitar because I'm pretty sure it's still somewhere in this project, but let's just look at that a little bit later. Anyway, there was a sick guitar line under it. So I thought that was super cool, and I tend to always speed up my vocals, so I record them at a lower BPM and then speed it up, because that way it will automatically sound like you're sampling something. You know, when you sample a record or like an old R&B thing, there's just a cool sound to that, and I try to emulate that by just recording it at a slow BPM. So it doesn't sound so singy, like she just a cappella like sang over that record. I want it to sound like I took it from somewhere and changed it. And by just changing the speed, you automatically get that effect. And you can also do fun stuff with the pitching that way. So I did that, I sped it up, and I pitched it up 3. And then you get the vocal. Now if I go all the way to the left here, what you'll see is the way I kind of work is I basically make a loop with all the elements. I try to not do arrangement, mixing, everything in one session. I try to do one session where I'm just spurring out ideas, and then later I'll sort them out. Oh, this is good, this is trash. Arrange it this way. And that's what I've done here. So what I started with was the vocal. Oh, without that filter, which is probably on the master. Yeah, let's get rid of that. All right. So I started with the vocal, and I started building some drums around it. Claps. And I think there's a filter on here as well. Yeah, let's disregard that. Is there a filter on there? Why is there filters on everything? And when I'm doing this, I'm not trying to, and it's like a couple of top loops, a couple of percussion loops that I do that a lot. I kind of cut them up, so I drop in a loop and I'm like, oh, I really like this sound, and I cut it out. And I basically do that from like a bunch of loops, so you get this new loop basically. But when I'm doing that, I'm not trying to use the perfect sounds. Because when I'm adding these drum sounds in, I just want to get like a feel of where this is going to go, and I don't want to go in there like, okay, good, we got a nice vocal, you know, we got a cool kick drum, let's look for a hat, and then go to my sample packs and then be like, all right, yeah. And when I'm done with that, when I found a good hat, I'm already kind of like tired, or I'm not that creative anymore. I really try to stay in that flow where I'm something, oh, this excites me, so let's just keep going. Throw some drums at it, and we'll sort the perfect sounds out later. So I think the percussion kind of stayed the way it is, maybe with some chops. But it's just a bunch of loops that I chopped up together. And what I like about these drums at this stage in the song is they're very rough. Like, they're not perfect at all. There's a lot of noise and a lot of weird stuff going on, but that kind of makes it full, you know? It allows me to listen to the track, even though it doesn't have that many elements yet, but it kind of still feels like it's a full production, so it helps me to just keep going. Then I wrote a bass line. Now, I found the guitar too. This was the guitar we started with. Now the bass is basically just playing the guitar, like the lowest note of the guitar. So if we look at that here, not even sure if all these. Just following the chords, and this bass sound is like, it's terrible. Like it's dying. The notes are too low for it, but that's all right. I'm not trying to get the perfect bass right now. I'm just trying to get the idea out. I'm just trying to make like something interesting. So I got some drums, I made some bass, I have a vocal, so when I play that all together, like let's do the drums and let's just do all the drums. And the bass and the vocal, we kind of get the main idea for the song. Now this is the point where most of the song is already written. I'm feeling this, I think this is exciting. So what I then try to do is write some elements that might not be like super in the main thing in the mix. Might be a little bit of background elements, or maybe even for like a breakdown. I'm not per se writing a drop right now. I'm just in a loop, I'm just writing a piece of music. So what I tend to do when I hear this, I think it's a bit too full to add like more stuff to it. If I start adding like pads and chords, it will just be a mess. So what I'll do is I'll just start turning elements off. So let's say we made this, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna turn off my my kick, and I'm gonna turn off my bass. Oh, I didn't do that. Yeah. Now I've created space, and maybe let's just turn off a little bit more. Let's turn off the, can I just turn on the clap and let the rest? Yeah. So now I have space, and what I'll start to do is I'll start to come up with other things. And I'm not per se thinking about, oh, I need to write a break, I need to write a drop. I'm just trying to write something that sounds cool with what I have at that moment. And I think those were like the chords that I put in, I think the Prophet ones, yeah. Again, same chords as the guitar, and obviously I know that's gonna be like good in a breakdown, but I'm trying not to think too much about that. I just make the chord, I think it sounds nice, I just keep it. And I basically keep writing elements like that and putting that in the project. So then I had this pad, I think this came from my OP1. Just a weird background thing. I have another pad, which is a sample. I have a string. I have this ARP, and this is also a good thing to show you guys, because this ARP, I think it sounds really good. But if I turn everything off, or let's not do the plugin itself, just the effects, turn everything off. That's dog shit. Like that's horrible. But what I try to do is when I write something, so I wrote it and I kind of was like, okay, you know what? It's a bit busy, but it's all right. I try to not just throw it away. I try to make something out of it. And what I did now is I took away some low end, some high end. I added RC20. I mean, which producer doesn't know that plugin? There's a delay on there, taking out more low end. This is panning, so it goes from left to right. And what really made it was like this super heavy sidechain. It just made it more calm. And why I didn't just remove those notes is because I liked the reverb tail those other notes gave it. I didn't want to get rid of that, because if I just take away the notes, it's not going to bleed out anymore. So that's why I just sidechained it super heavily. So it just does those last two notes, but it has the reverb tail of the other notes, and it kind of becomes like a chord. Yeah, and then some other shit didn't even make it to the final cut. Here, horn. This is, I think, I pulled this from What You've Done to Me and then just mess with it. This is a Reese. And now what I've got is the entire song basically written in a 16-bar loop. And if I've done that, I kind of quit a little bit. I just let it be for a little while. And the next day, or 2 days after, I don't know how much time you want to put in between that. But the next session I get back in there, I basically have all my building blocks ready, all these elements. I don't know if I'm going to use them or not, but they sound good with the vocal or with whatever I've got. So I can use them if I want. And then I sit down, and all I do is just look at those building blocks and be like, all right, let's put this there, and then let's put that there. And then, oh, I don't know what to do next. Oh, I have this, let's try that there. And I just start to put them in my project. And that way I'm not worrying about, oh, I need to make all these cool sounds or these chords or whatever. All I'm worrying about is I have this is what I got to work with. Let's try to make something out of it. And that's how I pulled this arrangement. I let this like to the left of my project, and then I pull it in there, and I'll be like, okay, the break, let's begin with the chords and do the bass later, and then I just kind of drag it in until it's this full arrangement. Full arrangement, all right. I'm gonna switch projects now, go into the bass line, because that's basically the thing that kept us going for months and delivered me very many sleepless nights. But before I move on, or while I move on to a different project, are there any questions or things? Maybe you can throw the question ball around.
Well, I have a question for you. Why do you use many more projects than one?
So I don't always do that, but when I collaborate with someone, I usually do. Because I have my version, I save it, we work on it, we have a new version, and I open it in a new project. And that way I can go back if I need to. Now, usually when I just work by myself, Ableton automatically does this backup thing where you can go back to previous versions, but I made it together with Sam, and Sam works in FL Studio, so I was trying to make sure that I could always go back, which turns out we really needed that at the end, because there was one major thing we needed to
Can I
fix.
do some dodgeball, guys? Any questions? So far, he's gonna load a new project. All right, I have a question, but I think you're gonna get there at the end. Why did you choose Mr Belt Wezol and not anybody else?
Well, it's actually pretty funny because the way it went is, at that time, they were doing like one of their all-night events here in Rotterdam, and I was there, as I always was, and they made like a video which went viral on TikTok. So we were already kind of talking, and in that period, I made this idea, so I was like, oh, you know, I really like these guys, I love their music, maybe they want to work on it together. So it was really easy to put in the conversation, because we were already, like, speaking.
You're not telling that because they're here, right?
No.
All right.
Not at all. So that's kind of how it...
Okay, let's get back to the bass then.
If it loads.
Oh, it's still loading.
It's still loading. It will, though. It will. I trust my computer.
So, I think my oh, it's on again. So no questions, guys? Oh. You're all smart, right?
That's probably it.
Yeah, they're
That's
all
probably
smart.
Or I'm explaining it very well.
Smart.
Okay.
Or you're a good teacher.
Probably not. So anyway, what I can like say in between when this is loading is why I was saying that it's important to keep like older versions of your project is what we noticed is right before basically the track was done, Spinnin was on it, everybody was happy with it, and just when everything was like, I was about to let everything go, okay, cool, I'll see you guys on release day, I bought like a GBL box, you know, like the little Bluetooth speakers, and I never had one of those. But at one point I just thought, oh, fuck it, I want one of those. Let me have it. I bought it, and I was like, let me listen to this new cool track, you know, on the speakers. So I listened on it, and it sounds so weird. And I was like, the one time I buy a Bluetooth speaker, it's broken. And then I switched to Spotify, because I was listening on SoundCloud. I was switching to Spotify, I was like, oh, no, it sounds good. So maybe it's SoundCloud messing it up. Went back to SoundCloud, listened to another song. It sounded great, too. I was like, hold up. It's not my song, right? So I went back to the song, and I just couldn't figure out why it sounded so weird. And after like half an hour, I was like, the Bluetooth speaker is mono. And everything else I listened on is stereo. So the vocal was phasing. There were some phasing issues caused by a plugin called Alter Boy. So I called Sam, I was like, we have a problem. So we went back to his house, and we basically spent the entire afternoon going back and forth through older versions of the project on my computer, on his computer, to fix it. We did fix it. You can listen to the track on mono, but always keep your old projects in case something like this happens and you don't have it anymore. You are in a nightmare. All right, so for the bass line, let's see. We got 2 layers. Where's the drop? Here. And you'll hear that this is already like a way more fleshed out version. And the bass is one of the things, again, we really went back and just couldn't get satisfied with the sound, because the notes we're playing are pretty low. And not every bass line can, like every bass sound can handle that. And I use a lot of those like very low register basses, and kind of the trick I try to tell people is don't really, don't think it's all layering, you know, because the first thing you do when a bass isn't really working, oh, let me layer it with something else or whatever, with a sub, which I ended up doing here. But the main thing to make like the lower bass lines work is to just pick the right sound. It's as simple as that. There are sounds that can do those low register bass lines. There are sounds that cannot do it. And the first sound we picked, it couldn't do that. And the other sounds we picked did it better than the first one, but still, eh. So what I ended up settling on here for this sound is it's an omnisphere sound. Let's just get rid of the effects here. If we go in there, yeah. So it's the classic Juno bass, and then I don't remember what I altered, but I usually change the ADSR, and I don't know if you guys use Omnisphere, but this button is really fun, because you can like crush. Why don't I hear that? on. Huh. I don't know why that's not working right now, but anyway, with these two you can really change the sound and it's just one slider. So that's a really nice parameter to like mess with. Anyway, I changed the ADSR. I probably did some of the filter work, but most of the sounds in Omnisphere are already really good. That's why I use it. And from here, I was basically looking for this. You can hear that the sound is not dying. And that's the most important part. Just make sure that at the lowest note, it doesn't sound like it's farting or dying or whatever. And it didn't here, so I was like happy with that. Then what I did to make it just a little bit more full is I used RC20 here, and I used a little bit of the noise. Just a little bit to fill out some frequencies. And if you put it on follow mode, it will only play while the note is playing. And I used a distortion. Also just making it louder. But I really like the distortion in the RC20. Now cut off all the lows. Don't always do this, please, because you don't always need to do it. But for this sound, the note here, the lowest note sounded nice in like the mid and the mid lows, but the sub wasn't really nice there. So I decided to put my own sub under it, and then I just cut everything out of the original sound. So the sub's gone. Then what I'm doing here is I'm doing, I don't know if you guys seen Ableton, but I'm basically sending like 100% wet reverb signal together with the dry one. So if you look at this is the reverb. It's really subtle. It's a really short one, and I cut out the low end. But it gives it a little bit of room. So you can definitely put reverb on your bass, just make sure you cut out the low end and don't make it like this long ass thing. But if you put a little bit, it can give it some space. Kickstart, I use Kickstart for every single sidechain. And I added the sub, and it's from Subboom Bass. Do you need to use Subboom Bass for the sub? Definitely not. I just used it because I think I just bought it. And there's saturation, there is EQ, taking out everything but the sub, and together they sound like, oh, you can solo the sub. It's a sub. That's in a group. I do a little bit of saturation there, a little bit of filtering, and again, sidechain. Because if I do distortion or saturation, and it's already sidechain, because I did sidechain before, but you're gonna bring up those sidechained frequencies. So everything that's like being ducked, you're bringing it back up by distorting and saturating it. So I'll sidechain it after. Again, to make sure there's room for the kick. And that's basically all I did for the bass. It's not a complicated bass, it just took really long to find. And you know, you're better off spending a lot of time just finding like the right bass sound and not doing that much crazy shit to it than trying to make a bad bass a really good bass by adding processing, and multi-band compression together with the kick and whatever. And you don't really need to do that if you just pick the right sound. So that for the bass. How much time do we still have?
You only got 4 minutes left.
So let's go to, if anybody has like a remaining question or whatever, we can kind of like finish this up.
I have a question to start. I see a lot of plugins come by. How do you find those things?
The plugins?
Yeah, which one you're choosing? Which one? I see Nick Romero, the sidechain, coming back like every time. Almost every producer uses it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot. There's so much. How can you guys find the right plugins for the right? You have to buy them. You know, how do you choose that?
It has a lot to do with what people that you look up to use. So when you first get into production, you gotta go on YouTube and just see all these videos and all these people using this stuff. And I feel like the first thing you do is just use everything they use, because you're like, oh, if I use the same tools, I'm gonna be like them, and then kind of find out that it doesn't work like that. But that's kind of how you get started, and then over the years, you see some videos, you see some friends using some stuff, and at a certain point, you get to a point where you're like, okay, you kind of know a lot of plugins that are out there, you kind of know what you use, and then you don't, at the beginning you really start to download a lot of plugins and get everything on your computer, but the longer you like produce, the more you kind of want, you don't want to get unnecessary plugins. You just want to have the tools that you know and that you can operate really well, and then if there's like a new flashy plugin, all right, what does it do? Yeah, this is, I'm like, no, I got stuff for that already, so I do recommend everybody to do that. Like, it's better to have less plugins that you know like really well instead of having all the Waves bundles and the ProQ bundles and everything and just not knowing what to do with it. Because if you have 500 plugins, like you're only going to use 10 maybe.
All right.
So less is more.
Any questions, or else I have a question again. Oh, please stand up. I'm going to throw it like. Oh. You have to talk in the top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I had a question about what you mentioned on the case where the lowest note on your bass sounds a bit like dying.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's a silly question because I've only I started producing a month ago, but I've experienced a situation where if I play my bass at an octave, let's say I have that, so the lowest note is dying, but then if I increase it an octave, then the highest note sounds too high, like too high for a bass.
Yeah.
What are your tips for that, or would you rather just completely change your baseline idea?
It's a very common problem, and there are like two ways you can go about it. If it sounds like the sound is dying, that's just never nice. So you're better off either just putting an octave up, and what you can do is what I did in What You've Done to Me. My other track is I layered it with a sub who was playing the low one, so it had the body, and what I did is automated it so the sub was just a little bit louder at those notes. So the main bass went like up an octave, and I put a sub under it, but I just put the sub up in volume a little bit compared to everywhere else, so that it kind of filled that gap. That's something you could do. Or what I recommend people to do is just pick a different bass sound that doesn't die at that frequency, because it's just important that your sounds don't sound like farts, basically.
Yeah.
So one of those things would be a solution.
Thanks.
Steven, you want to say something? Right, nice.
I think this is a very worn out question to ask an artist, but I'm always wondering what you, for instance, as an artist, are inspired by. Is that only sounds, or are there also other things that inspire you that you convert into music?
So for me, it depends a little bit. I'm a very musical guy, I'd like to think. I really like to make chords and that kind of stuff, even though I don't always use them in my music, but I'm really inspired by certain melodics. So I would say I need to hear something that inspires me, like something where I'm like, oh, that it has something, and then I kind of dive into it. I couldn't just sit down and be like, all right, I'll make this song or whatever. I'm kind of like looking for either that's a vocal or just a synth sound, or it could be drums, but something where I'm like, it has something, and then it just kind of goes.
Just say cars, man. Just say cars.
And cars.
No. One final question, and then we have to close it. I have a question because I think you started. Oh yeah, I have a question for you. I will come with you as well. But I have you started off saying, if you are not technically well, but you have good ideas, find somebody who can help you out. I think it's a discussion right now in the scene. Are you then truly an artist, or you're an artist with help? How do you see that?
So the way I see it now, I'm very technical because I spent like 2-3 years just learning all the technical stuff. And the thing I kind of got from that, I got to a point where I made really nice sounding songs, like sonically, but they sucked because they weren't really songs. They were just pieces of music that sounded nice, if that makes any sense. So then I kind of took it completely the different direction, where I was like, let's not worry about anything technical, throw away all my waves, compressors, and all that stuff. Let's just worry about just the idea. And that's when I feel like I really started growing. So then I try to give that to like people who are trying to learn it. It doesn't matter so much that you don't know like everything technical. You can always learn it, but if you focus on creating like great ideas and you want to like release songs now, you could always pay somebody else to just do the technical part. And I still think you're the artist, because the technical part, everybody who's like a little bit of computer nerd can learn.
Yeah.
You just have
I think it goes
make
both,
the hours.
It goes both ways.
Yeah, it
Some
definitely,
guys,
definitely,
they don't like to be in the
goes both
picture.
ways.
Your question, please.
Thank you for your walkthrough. I have a question similar to the last one. So how do you decide what to make next? Like, how is your creative flow works?
So basically I don't. What I do is I look for something that inspires me, and I go to the studio with like a plan. I used to do that a lot, but it didn't really work for me. I never go in and just sit down, all right, let's make something. You know, I usually go in with an idea like, oh, maybe you know that vocal from that, and then with this kind of beat, or oh, I heard this beat, I thought that sounded great, let's sample some of the drums. I try to sit down with a plan, and usually it doesn't end up being what I planned it to be. But that's all right. You know, it's just, I like to go in with some sort of direction and not just sit down, have a blank screen and be like, for like an hour.
All right.
That's what I try to do.
Perfect. This is the end of the first masterclass, ladies and gentlemen. Please make some noise for Millean.